Welcome everyone. This is Nichel Anderson. I'm your host for my podcast show, Nichel Anderson Short Stories and Beyond. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I'm going to do a particular episode that's quite different than I usually do, where it's impromptu or what have you, talking about a particular section of the short stories that I have been doing since I started podcasting. And it's going to be on King Mahlon and the tribal leaders. Now, when I started this particular podcast, was on the timeline that's outside of the book that I wrote, which you've been following me for a while. It's my book, Mitzrayim, A Memoir of a Past Life in Ancient Egypt, that I turned into a theatrical production. Came to Atlanta on the objective to make it a movie. A mentor that I thought was mentoring in the right way really didn't have my best interest. So that's another episode of the podcast episode on that. And led me down the road towards stage plays, which I never knew that was the case. So not to get too much into that, I did post a journal in the beginning of this year, and check that out. It's on facebook.com/MOLIAE, where I just opened up. I have it pinned, and I got so many wonderful reviews and support of my journey, because as of yet, I have not made that into a movie. So at any rate, that's with that. So I want to talk about now about King Mahlon and the tribal leaders. So it's not going to be a long podcast, but I think it's great because when I started the podcast in that timeline before the time of Princess Aamina, it just opened up all of these other universes. That's how long I've been waiting to turn that book into a movie. Can you imagine? Anyway, but nevertheless, and if you want to support me on this journey to get it to be a feature film, right? Not the webisode that I did. I was like really just doing things as, you know, as time wasn't presenting itself that was going to be. And then I was still thinking, okay, my mentor at the time to say do stage plays, you know, I'll do that. I mean, the feature film. So anyway, connect with me. Okay. Join my newsletter. You can go to MOLIAE.com and sign up to be a part of this journey and sign up to get our newsletters. All right. So sign our email list on that. And so when I did the podcast, that timeline, like I said, there's so many characters. It's like with so many characters with my book. So this episode is going to hone on a section of that epic story that I'm bringing to everyone. And I hope you enjoy it. It kind of make you somewhat understand that slice of pie of this big, big buffet of stories that I'm sharing with you. All right, so let's get started. So King Mahlon. This is going to be like a short bio, but really move into the tribe. So today, this particular podcast is focusing on that section of King Mahlon and the tribal leaders. Why in season 1, when I'm discussing or sharing with you these stories, that it was a war. Remember, in episode 1, it was before the time of Princess Aamina. Princess Aamina has not been born yet, and we see Hagar that opens that scene. Princess Hannah is there, and she's observing the leadership and the role and how her mother is handling things on a world stage. There's a war, or it had been a war, I should say. It seems like it can be, you know, bringing up more of a confrontation, but definitely was a battle that, for somewhat, it simmered down. And King Mahlon is not there. So to kind of fast forward from that timeline, remember the timeline of my book is when Princess Aamina is on the scene and she is to marry King Damal. That's what the plays were about, what have you. Like I said, I didn't want it to be a play, but nonetheless, that's what I took and had to condense it to a play. And you've been following me for a while, you will have to say, especially when you go to Facebook and read my journal that I post on my MOLIAE Facebook homepage. This needed to be a movie because it's so grand, right? There's so much going on. So I had to condense it to that part. So getting back to King Mahlon, or with this podcast today, is that King Mahlon, he represents of ancient times when not only they was named of kings, because in my book, I never used the word pharaoh, right? I focus on the time when they were called kings. And nevertheless, you have King Mahlon. He represents so much. That's why a lot of males, when I say, okay, I need someone to read, they pick King Mahlon. And I like to say my new tagline here, it's the 360, babe. So King Mahlon represents those beginning kings, when those that know in the destination of who's going to rule who. Mitzrayim was at the top. Mitzrayim is ancient Egypt. So in my stories that I started 4 years ago, and eventually I bring King Mahlon to the forefront when he got healed from the battle. The battle was against other tribal leaders. So in this episode, I'm talking about the King Mahlon and the tribal leaders, where they wanted to be King Mahlon, where they wanted that power. And the different tribal leaders, they're spread out, but definitely what was feeling at the time when I was doing the podcast shows is that the tribal leaders from the west part of the Sudan, which we're calling Africa now, had most of the, let's say, not trusting, not working in alignment to push back anyone that want to enter the domain of Tamat and work together as a team, work together as, one big family. No, that wasn't going to work. So there was deception and there was betrayal. And so the tribal leaders that I'm referring to is those that had their own leadership in their own community of villages, but wanted that Estelle. So, or wanted that signification of being a leader on planet Tamat, which we call Earth now, and that they caused the friction and caused other tribes to turn against Mahlon. And Egypt, as the history goes, has always been one of the forefronts of power and prestige and knowledge and leadership. Okay? So if you take it from that time, you will see the admiration of King Mahlon. He's the seed that continue on from the designated that this land shall be called this, and we shall name this family kingship, the royalty family down lineage. And that's where King Mahlon lineage come from. So he has always been connected to the royal family. He didn't get married into it. He didn't have someone that got married into it. He's a direct seed from that. And he met Queen Hagar when, I would say, it just kind of feel like before he was, I would say 17 or maybe 16, or in that range. I'm going to do a podcast on their meeting, but nonetheless, he was always, it came through when I write King Mahlon, of that long tradition of royalty and kings and the knowledge that he embodied. And so at the time of my podcast, when I'm bringing this forward and he does not open that scene as Queen Hagar, but we know a little bit more of what's going on in episode 2, right? Episode 2 of MOLIAE saga that I'm doing on my podcast show, that he's hurt or what have you. We learn of that tradition of procedural method, as or as thou. And going forward, when he regain his strength, and he goes into the Congo of leaders, which is other tribal leaders. And I want to kind of touch now on the tribal leaders. So the tribal leaders, like I said, when I'm writing the stories, when it came through, it really felt like the West Coast and someone from the South. And it was like they was trying to, recruit more tribal leaders to not follow the leadership. And sometimes when you're around other leaders and you see the one to speak more in a way that can put all the ideas together and present it in a way that is soothing to the mind, they follow that leader. And then you have those that don't want to see the goodness of that you're learning from it. You get an opportunity to get yours, opportunity to be able to lead. It just so happens it's King Mahlon. So he represents that. And he's a sharing, understanding type. But it was some tribal leaders that just felt that it should not be Egypt. It should not be Mitzrayim. It should be down here in the Congo. I mean, we got all these resources. What the heck, And that's what breeds up the opportunity for the Orions, which I'm going to do another episode to talk about them. But King Mahlon is a direct descendant of those that designated, as I said earlier, those are the war family. Then you have the tribal leaders. Now, in one of the episodes, I'm not sure it's episode 5 or 6, we hear about this Sanel, and he's something. He never liked King Mahlon. eventually I'm going to show or tell, share that story of how they met and why it was so much friction between them. And he's from the west coast of the Sudan. And so he's a leader of a tribe, because remember in episode 3 or 4, do not quote me on that. You definitely got to go back to season 1. It's the young General Tata that was in my book, and that you see certain, what you have probably seen certain interviews or something relating to him or what have you in one of my productions. And he goes see Sanel. It's a big confrontation. He's looking for somebody. Come to find out, he's looking for his father. That it was the general at that time before he became general, and it was during that battle that you come to find out what was going on after episode 1. Something happened, and that's what happened. The battle. And so Sanel is one of those, we just don't rub you the wrong way, just da da da, and he's real deep in it. But he has a brother that's kind of northwest. Maybe Algeria or the USA, where that would be compared to where Egypt is now. And his brother betrayed him, but nonetheless, his brother's a tribal leader. And the tribal leaders, you have the ones that work in alignment with Mitzrayim, with Egypt, and those that don't. Of course, as history proceeds itself, Egypt becomes more dominant and more powerful, because it was predicted it will be. Now, of course, every empire, what have you, has this time in history, and we learn from it, we don't learn from it. But the tribal leaders at that time, it was a mixture that King Mahlon had to deal with, and they was willing to sacrifice. They was willing to betray the other brothers of the Congo, and that's what we're dealing with. So when I talk about the tribal leaders, they are in itself have their power of influence, because remember, they had to coordinate their own people to fight against a major army. So I guess I just wanted to kind of talk about the tribal leaders and talk about King Mahlon and talk about their perspective. And right quick, there's an episode is where it's Queen Hagar to go see Rulin. Rulin is considered a tribal leader, which basically is like a president of a country, or whatever you can say. Or he came off really in the military that became later like a president of a country, because when I was writing about him, it's more if he knew of the military force of that area that he was, which is pretty much going to be on the East Coast, but he knew what was going on the West Coast. And him and Mahlon don't get along either, but I really think that's because of Hagar. They both love the same woman, and she just picked Mahlon. That's another podcast, but nonetheless. And in that's where we are. So I hope you do continue to tune in to my shows. I am coming back with my short stories. That's another announcement I want to do, that I'm bringing a special guest from Egypt. All right, and he's going to read for King Damar and some of other males of my short stories. So I know you've been holding on, and you're like, oh my goodness, when are we going to find out about the short stories? When are we going to hear about what's going on? It's been so long. Don't worry, I'm going to deliver. You're going to love it. And my short stories will be returning. So the next time I'm going to do an episode will be on the 19th, and I'm going to talk about the Orions and the tribal leaders who betrayed King Mahlon. And I think this is good because we get more into it. You can follow it. So when I do make my announcement, you'll be like, oh, I got to tune into that. Or I make my announcement, look, I'm waiting to do a film. I need some support, right? And then this is the story, of my book. Can you be a part of that? You'll know what the heck I'm talking about. And when I say before the timeline of the book, guess what? You will know. You will say, I want to support Nichel. She always giving, creating these stories that is like I'm in awe and feel so wonderful about, and la la la. You're welcome. Now, in the 360, can you join the email list? Can you pass this on when I say, if I do decide to do a fundraising for the film project, could you participate? Buy something that's it's monetary in the sense that it can come back into the production. I appreciate it. I wrote that book over 20 something years ago on a typewriter, okay, and passionately kept doing that, and I wasn't sure, and I fought through all that self-doubt, and I got the manuscript done in 2 months. I did that, and fast forward, those that was able to read it and to be a part of whatever I created, I invested in them. Time, money, okay, motivation to get up when I wanted to say I don't want to do this no more, when I turned into a play, because I really shouldn't supposed to be doing that. Gave, right, and I'm still waiting on the return in that sense of wanting to see it in the movie. So if I do step out and say this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm raising, anything can help. Heck, if you can be a part of the tech team, I ask for your support. And with that done and said, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for supporting me, and follow me on my social media, Twitter. Okay, follow MOLIAE. We're on Instagram. Back on Instagram. Follow us on Instagram. Share it with someone. Tell somebody. Go on our Facebook page. Follow. Okay. Share some of our posts. Okay. I got so many posts on there. I know you're gonna find something like, I love this. Share it. Sharing is caring and loving, and it's supportive. It's the 360. All right. Thank you so much. And don't forget, if you really follow MOLIAE, and you like the message or what have you, guess what? We got t-shirts. Go to MOLIAE.com. We got a whole t-shirt of collections. Okay, MOLIAE is about love. It's about relationships. It's about true love. It's about family. It's about learning that you have the power to make the choices to define your destiny. All right. Thank you.